our bottom line as we look at this is every moment matters. And that's what you're going to see about Exodus. As you go through the book of Exodus, because there's times in your life when you say, what in the world is going on? God, where are you? I don't understand what's going on. This doesn't make sense, God. Man, the Israelites they must have felt the same way. But you need to understand that God is the author and the primary cause of everything. He is in charge. He is the one who controls the future, the past. It's His story. We're a part of a meta-narrative. We're a part of a larger story that fits into His story, and every moment matters. Now, what you're going to understand about Exodus, what I want you to know is, Exodus is an incredible history of that era. Archaeology has proven that the Bible, all archaeology always proves the Bible accurate, right? Exodus gives us a great historical narrative, but it's not just history. It's the gospel in Old Testament language, okay? That's what Exodus is. It's the gospel in Old Testament language. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, I think it's 10, that this story in Exodus happened for God to teach us about salvation, right? I mean, think about it. As we come down through Exodus, we're going to see God's going to redeem His people by telling them to slaughter a lamb, put its blood on the doorframes, a perfect lamb, put its blood on those doorframes, the Passover happen and all that. And all that was a foreshadow of how God would slaughter His Son on the cross and how His blood, how He would pass over those who were covered in the blood of Jesus. And it was a lesson to teach us. The story's there to teach us, right, about salvation. And so we're going to dive in. Randall Alignimouth, he has already read 1 Corinthians 1 through 22. I'm going to go back. We're going to break it down now and start looking at the individual pieces. I'll break it into 3 sections, all right? Our first is 1 through 7, so let's look at it. It says, these are the names of the sons of Israel with whom came to Egypt with Jacob. Now, Israel and Jacob are the same person. Jacob is referred to as Israel, okay? You got Abraham, the promise of God, Isaac, Jacob. So Jacob and Israel, it's a person now. Israel's a person at this point in Genesis, the end of Genesis. It's Jacob, okay? And so Israel, who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. Then he gives us the names here. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All these descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all of that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Now, you know, as you look at this, it's like, okay, it just tells us, man, here's the census of the people that went to Egypt. Joseph died. Man, there are a lot of people. Well, it sounds like it's a matter of fact. Well, here's what Moses is doing. Moses is connecting Exodus with Genesis to let us know it's really not 2 books, it's volume 2, Exodus. And so he's connecting the two. He talks about the language that he uses in Genesis about them being fruitful and multiplying. That goes back to Genesis and creation, right? He created Adam and Eve. Be fruitful and multiply. That goes back to Noah. After God destroyed the world with the flood, He told Noah, be fruitful and multiply. So he's connecting it with that. He's connecting it with the names of the census that go to Egypt. And then Joseph dies. He's basically restating what happened in Genesis to connect the two, okay? And so as he connects these two to help us remember, okay, how did they get there? Well, remember Joseph. How did they get to Egypt? Let me get you to Egypt. Joseph, his life had more ups and downs than a Six Flags roller coaster, right? I mean, man, he was daddy's favorite out of all the sons. That's good. His brothers hated him and wanted to kill him because he's daddy's favorite. That's bad. They didn't kill him. That's good. Instead, they decided, you know, we're going to make a little money and get rid of him at the same time, so they sold him into slavery. That's bad. Well, he ended up in Potiphar's house. Potiphar was the high official in Egypt. He was the chief of the captain of the palace guard, basically the chief of Popo there in Egypt, right? And so, I mean, the chief of police, and he loved Joseph. That's good. He trusted Joseph so much because Joseph was so trustworthy. You want to be trusted? Be trustworthy. So Joseph was so trustworthy that he loved him so much that he put him in charge of his entire house, made him his executive assistant. He basically gave him the keys to the house. Here's my debit card, my credit card. passwords to my computer, passwords to my bank accounts. Joseph was in charge of everything, and he was doing great, right? But the Bible also says that Joseph was a handsome man. He was yoked and wore a shirt that said, "Welcome to the gun show," right? That was Joseph. And so, and Potiphar's wife, she wanted Joseph to work a little overtime, if you know what I mean, right? So Joseph, this would have been very tempting, because Joseph is a young, late teens, early 20s, virgin, raging hormones. I mean, Potiphar's wife was beautiful, a very attractive, powerful lady, wealthy lady who was used to getting whatever she wanted. This was probably commonplace for her. He's away from his family, his friends, his church. Who's going to find out? No one's going to know. She does this all the time. Who's it going to hurt? He was tempted, but he loved God. He loved God, so he ran, guys. That is an important lesson for all of us to learn. You're going to go out of here today, and you're going to face temptations, and you got to run, right? You got to run. And so Joseph ran. Well, she wasn't used to being scorned. She wasn't used to being rejected. So this made her a little upset. So she lied, said Joseph tried to rape her, had him thrown into prison. He was rotting away doing hard time until God gave him the interpretation of one of Pharaoh's dreams. In the dream, basically the interpretation of there's going to be 7 years of extreme plenty, followed by 7 years of extreme famine. And Joseph not only interpreted the dream, he put together a plan for Egypt to not just survive, but thrive and be, leaders in the world during this time. Pharaoh was so pleased, loved him so much, made him the VP of all the land, put everything under Joseph's charge. That's great, right? And so Joseph moves his entire family to Egypt. They come to Egypt as refugees. Pharaoh gives them the best land, the Delta Nile in all of Egypt, and man, things are going great. They come to Egypt as 70 persons, it tells us. 70 persons come into Egypt. They're a small family, really. They're a clan of 70 people. But before the Exodus, by the time of the Exodus, they would grow, we're told, into 600,000 men and women and children. So almost 2 million people. You see, Genesis is the story of God creating the world. Exodus is the story of God creating the church, a people for himself, a called out, redeemed people. Exodus is a story of God creating a people. So they grow. It's the birth of a nation, and it's an incredible story. And so let's go on and read here 8 through 14. 8 through 14 says, "Now there arose a new king over Egypt." Now, king of Egypt, Pharaoh, same terminology, okay? Matter of fact, what was it? American Pharaoh won the deal yesterday, Triple Crown winner. I mean, he's American Pharaoh because his owner's Egypt, and I don't know if it's a good name or not because Pharaoh gets his tail kicked here, but he named him that, and first Triple Crown winner in how many years? Man, 30-some, 40 years. Man, who knows, man? It might be the Cubs or even the Titans year this year, right? So, doubt it, but you never know. "Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph." Don't really mean he didn't know who Joseph was. He's far removed, but it means he didn't care about Joseph, all right? "And he said to his people, 'Behold, the people of Israel.'" Now look, in Genesis 1 there, in the first few verses, Israel was a person, right? Jacob, it's a person. Now it's a people. Now it's a nation. Right? So it's lots of years have gone. Lots of years between Exodus 1:7 and Exodus 1:8. Lots of years. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them." There's only one other time that this phrase, "come, let us," is used prior to this, and it's when the people wanted to build the Tower of Babel. Come, let us build a tower that will honor our name. Here, Pharaoh's wanting to build a city to honor his, not honor the name of God. Turns out bad, right? "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for the Pharaoh's store cities of Pithom and Ramses, but the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad, and the Egyptians were in the dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves. and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and in brick and in all kinds of work in the field. And all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So here's what we can know. God promised Abraham, you remember, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, then you get Israel. God promised Abraham, I will make you into a great nation. Your descendants will be as numerous as the sands in the sea, on the seashore, numerous as, look up into the sky. Abraham, can you count the stars? Abraham's like, what are you talking about? God, I don't even have children. I'm an old man. God always keeps his promises. God gave Abraham a son, Isaac, and you remember, then Jacob, and then now we're exploded to over 2 million people by Exodus. God keeps his promises. Now here's what you also need to understand. God not only promised Abraham that he would make him into a great nation, he also promised Abraham that great nation will be enslaved in a foreign land for 400 years. Long before this ever happened. Nothing is arbitrary, folks. Every moment has meaning because it's God's story. Every moment has meaning. He told Abraham, your people, that'll be a great nation, are also going to be enslaved in a foreign land and mistreated for 400 years. Man, the people of Israel, they went to Egypt thinking, this is awesome. We got the best land. They grew into a mighty people. Wow, they're living the life, right? All of a sudden, a new Pharaoh comes to town. A new Pharaoh is coronated as king, and he's from a different dynasty. And this is many pharaohs after Joseph's death. This is not the next Pharaoh or even the next or the next. Many pharaohs down the line, several generations. A new Pharaoh come in. He had known Egypt's history like we know our history. We know but he didn't care really about Joseph. He was more interested in his dynasty than Joseph's legacy and who Joseph was, right? He was interested in he was insecure. He felt threatened by all these Israelites. He reasoned in his mind, there's so many of them. They're multiplying like rabbits. They're everywhere. If our enemy attacks, they might ally themselves with our enemies and overtake us and run us out of our own land. We got to do something about this. And so he made a plan to begin to thin out the population of Israel, to begin to thin them out, to begin to selective genocide, so to speak. And so that they would dwindle in numbers. Now, here's what I need you to understand, or here's what you need to understand. Listen, Israel, as God said, Israel has been attacked with the intent of extinction more than any nation on the face of the earth. Israel still survives. And God said, I will bless those who bless you to Israel. I will curse those who curse you. This is a promise from God. God always keeps his promise. You ever question it? Just go back. Where are the Babylonians? Where are the Babylonians, the Persians, even the Romans and the Egyptians that were world powers that are no more? Israel is still strong. Ask Stalin or Hitler. Hopefully you don't ask them because they're burning. Hopefully you won't burn, right? So go back to history. Go back through history. God keeps his promises. What that tells us. Folks, you don't want to go against Israel unless you want to be cursed, right? And so God says, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. Pharaoh, he's had a plan here he wants to do away, and Pharaoh doesn't even know it, but he's a pawn in the story. It's God's story. Pharaoh thinks he's a god. He thinks it's his story being written. It's God's story. Pharaoh's a pawn. This really isn't a battle between Pharaoh and Israel. This is a battle, a cosmic battle that God announced in Genesis 3:15 between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. It's a battle that rages today. It's a cosmic battle going on. Pharaoh is simply a pawn in this story. And so Pharaoh probably thought, you know what, if I force them into hard labor, into slavery, man, we'll make them work hard all day long. They won't have time for pleasure. And then when you get through working, they won't want to have pleasure, so they won't procreate. Or maybe I'll work them so hard they become impotent. But his plan was if we work them so hard, their population will decrease. We'll work some of the older guys so hard they die. They won't want to have pleasure, so there won't be as many babies born. We'll decrease their population by forced labor. You know what? It's the same, with the powerful still trying to exploit the weak and the marginalized today, isn't it? And we see this all through.